So, the next talk is about ancient history, or at least ancient history as far as computers are concerned. A long, long time ago, there was a company called Sun Microsystems, and then they got bought by Oracle. And that destroyed a lot of great hardware, but it also destroyed, or nearly destroyed, an interesting code base. The code base that, in the end, became LibreOffice. Thorsten and Björn are here to tell you about what happens when your code base gets bought by a by a huge giant IT company, and how you survive that.
It's actually about being bought by a lawnmower, as the saying goes. So the company with the mission of destroying open source projects. Right, so we got somehow, I think we nerd-sniped you into actually attending a talk about a bit of a history of OpenOffice and LibreOffice. Welcome, everyone. So, quick introduction, who's talking today? First of all, me, my name is Thorsten. I've been with the OpenOffice project for, I don't know, more than 20 years. So I started at Sun. I got out before Oracle bought the company. I was then working for SUSE Linux, and I was working for another company who was serving the Linux project for City of Munich. I founded my own company some 3 years ago, and I'm still happily contributing and working on the old code base that used to be OpenOffice. It's now called LibreOffice. And the great thing about open source is that you can change your job and take your work with you.
Yeah, hi. I'm Björn, that's me. I joined the OpenOffice team at Sun in 2008, and I was a very happy camper back then, because I was in Sun. That was wonderful. And then this evil empire bought them. And so shortly after, LibreOffice was founded, and I quickly did exactly what Thorsten said. I did the same job, just for a different company, namely Canonical, and started with working on LibreOffice shortly after. And I became a member of the board, so I, from the start, when we founded the foundation behind LibreOffice, just like Thorsten, and I even stayed on the board after I quit the job at Canonical and was only a volunteer contributor to LibreOffice, where I was just hacking in the evening in my free time.
Okay, so I heard that people are slightly exhausted from the heat and everything, and there are lots of great talks, and now there's this here. So we thought we make it a little bit more interactive. So if you have lots of questions, ask them during the talk. Like, there comes a slide, you have a question or you have a comment, make it. We will come running around with the microphone. There will be time for questions afterwards, but not that much. So first question, who has been affiliated or working with one of the many projects that Oracle axed? Yay! 1, 2, 3, at least 4, 5. That's a decent number. Okay, so let's start with some how to bootstrap out of Oracle's grip. So, a bit of history. Well, the code base is ancient. Well, not that ancient. The idea is from 1985 when there was a DOS application. So, but the actual code base is from the 1990. Literally, the first commit in that old code base is from, I think, March 1990. So it's really quite ancient. C++, timeline overall. So OpenOffice started in 2000. So that's also 23 years ago. There was lots of like tiny little forks or semi-forks over the time of that code base. So and quite relevant. I might be biased there, but it's one of the largest open source projects still around. It was a great thing that Sun back in the day open sourced it, almost I think as significant as Netscape open sourcing Mozilla and that code base. Yeah, so history, whatever. Sun releases that. Some changes there in license. So the first license was relatively commercially friendly. So IBM at the time took the opportunity to fork that internally and not contribute back. So for the project of that size and that relevance, I do believe that license matters. And in this case, Sun agreed and changed the license to LGPL, which actually then requires contributing back. And then sadly they cut a side deal with IBM, so IBM could continue to use the proprietary version under a special license, which in the end community members didn't like that much. So pretty much from, not from day one, but probably from 2004 or 5, there was some unhappiness in the community. There was also some promises for an independent open office foundation that never came to pass. So there was some bit of grumbling there, and of course the project itself was very single vendor. So there was Sun, and then there was a very large gap to the next contributor in terms of size. Then again, it was very successful, like in gaining traction and gaining support and being ported to, I don't know, any number of platforms. Yeah, last major release was 2008, and then this happened. So there was this announcement that Sun was not doing well for a number of reasons, and there was a number of companies being paraded as potential bidders, and in the end, Oracle was outbidding everybody else, and that pretty much from day one was causing concerns. So Oracle was known already at the time to be very bottom line focused. It was very obvious at the time with a staff of more than 100, I think 110, 120 people at the Sun Microsystems Open Office team. That looked pretty unsustainable under Oracle rule. So I think at least in late 2009, early 2010, all over the world, community people started looking into what are we going to do. So there was already kind of community support and communication channels being axed and being increasingly hard to get someone to commit to something inside the Open Office team. So the writing was essentially on the wall, what's going to happen. There was a history of Oracle. There was other open source projects that were under Sun maintainership that had similar concerns. I think at the time when early 2010 already, Swan was already, I think, in serious peril. So overall, people started to be concerned and started to think about what to do. And I think this is one of the first ingredients that you need if you want to try and break away. You need critical mass. You need critical mass at the end for users to matter. But first of all, you need a critical mass of people, of contributors that matter. If you don't have that, probably don't do it yet. So there was the time before 2009. There was some people who were considering putting some pressure on Sun or going at their own. I think ultimately probably all of those attempts would have failed because, as I said, you need a critical mass of contributors. You need most of the code contributors for something like LibreOffice or Firefox or something else. You need a number of knowledgeable people who can actually maintain your code base. Otherwise, don't do it. So that was suddenly there was this opportunity. So there was a way with lots of people in the community being concerned. That's ingredient number one. Then
one example question I would like to ask the audience: who here knows and uses Hudson CI?
Example.
Who uses Jenkins or knows about Jenkins? Okay, Jenkins is just Hudson without the trademark name, because Hudson was a project by a Sun employee who did that mostly in their free time, and they fired him, if I remember correctly, and afterwards told him, your project has to do this, that, and those ways, after they fired him. Otherwise, you can't use our trademark. And then Hudson became a new name, which was Jenkins. So that was a bit of a foreshadowing for things to come.
Right. So, and that's the second ingredient. So, if you are end user focused, you bloody need a name, and if you don't have a name, you very quickly need to make your name. So, and then there was another one of the problems that actually Sun at the time, and then Oracle held the trademark rights for OpenOffice. So that was out. Right. So that caused quite some headache and some planning there. So you need critical mass, you need a name, and you need something actually that people can, at the day when you announce that, you need something actually there. You need some bits, some binaries to download. So all of that taken together, what happened then was that all those people around the world were coming together. There was very conveniently, there was a very last OpenOffice conference in September 2010, and everybody was there anyway. And
it was my first conference, and I was very happy to be there and be at this huge event. It was my first OpenOffice conference, and these guys did other things than talking about OpenOffice.
Yeah, so well, we were there, but we wanted to meet like privately, but it was this kind of Oracle-run event. So we all had a stomach ache one evening, and we didn't go for the river cruise. But everybody, like surprisingly, everybody had a stomach ache. There was nothing wrong with the food, but yeah, we all came up with the same excuse. So we met in Budapest for some conspirative dinner, and hashed out the not the final supper.
You know that I'm not in there. I didn't know. Well, except for everyone having a stomach ache, I didn't know about what they were doing. But clearly, they were doing something.
Yeah. So we actually hashed out that. So we launched on September 27. So there was like looking each other into the eye and like committing to it. Like, yeah, we're going to do that. And we had people from Linux distributions. We had lots of volunteers there. So we had quite some critical mass, I would say, at the time. And we sat there for dinner, had some good meal and some wine, and we looked each other in the eye and said, yeah, we're going to do that. We go live, and then prepared everything, like, yeah, whatever. Lots of nights hacked and websites prepared and downloads and binaries prepared, and we set up a mirror system so that when we hit the go button, that we wouldn't when I don't know, all those 20 people start downloading LibreOffice, that the mirror infrastructure wouldn't actually break down. It wasn't a bit more than 20. Actually, we might quite a splash, and so that's probably so. When you have critical mass, probably you have some people with some marketing experience, with some press contacts, and for something where you need to make your name. That's the fourth ingredient that really matters. So from day one, you have to be in the press for a while because nobody knows you. So people need to read about you for a little while. Right. So we went on, and we actually asked ourselves the question: is this a dud? So is this going to fly or not? And of course not. It's a fork and a successful one. Yeah, we went on, announced, went live, had some, I think the first month, I don't know, I don't have that number, but it was not shy of a million, not much lower than 1 million downloads, I think, in the first month. And yeah, for something end user, like give the people something to play with. Okay, going on. I'm going to speed this up a little bit. So anybody remembers those days? Like, so we actually were quite lucky. Like, everybody remembers like Heise writing about that. Yeah, that's great. So I think that's so we're super lucky there. And of course, it was like fitting the narrative, like Oracle bad and So it was kind of helpful to be at that moment. But that's probably the fifth ingredient. Like, use the moment. You will know when the moment has come, and then jump and don't hesitate. Just fucking do it. Right. So then, well, actually, then we did it, and then actually the problem started and the work started. So before that was all kind of theoretizing, but then actually we had to start working, and we had to change from something that was Sun funded, Sun promoted, Sun owned, and then Oracle owned, to something that was completely community run. So from this umbrella, there's someone holding the umbrella and paying the bills, to something where you actually are thrown into the cold water and you have to run it yourself. Trying to actually make a difference, and using this momentum that we had from that day, and the momentum was actually also on the development side. That was essentially 10 years of pent-up demand, where people wanted to change something, and Sun said, no, whatever, and our engineering quality standards prohibit us from doing this. So, I don't know. Like, Sun was kind of still big corporate, and this was community, and people just wanted to break free and hack, and that's what they did. Right. So that's a bit of the commit history there. So you see this pretty much coming up from zero. The blue top there, that's Oracle, OpenOffice committed. So there's almost nothing else when we started. So almost all development was actually done by Sun engineers, or Oracle engineers. And then you see this explosion, this Cambrian explosion there of people starting to contribute. You see Christmas, that's when people take a break, but it recovers from there on. So lots of things that we did that led us to being on every Linux distribution, that led the trade press likes us because we had lots of feature releases, so they could write something about us.
And also, this release train thing is quite important to actually lay a different foundation for the community or the contributors, because in the release train everyone has like the same influence on when something is released, namely not at all, because it will be released by a specific time. And at Sun Oracle it was always, I spoke to a release engineer once at Sun, and he said, well, I always take vacation on the release date because I know that it's not going to be released on that date. So because it would always be delayed. So there was a privilege in Sun Oracle to set the release date at whatever they wanted, and all the others didn't have any influence. And the release train actually made all contributors equal and their influence equal. You had to get your feature in by a specific date, and if not, then either in the next release in half a year or in a feature fix release, just like everyone else. So there was no special treatment there. That's quite important, actually.
And then Oracle threw us a curveball. That one there. So they shut down the OpenOffice team and contributed the project to the community, which had already moved on. So they found another community to contribute that to, and donated it to the Apache Foundation. The upside of that was that LibreOffice could relicense. So the code was then suddenly available under the Apache license. And
also Oracle had fired everyone working in there, everyone that was working on OpenOffice. Just 5 people were rehired by IBM. But that's just a side note. So they donated the project after firing everyone.
They fired everyone, and then they donated the project. And so it was kind of. I think we did, in hindsight, we did the right thing with forking. Of course, it would have been nicer to agree, let's say, beforehand, so there wouldn't be 2 competing projects. hard to say, like alternative histories. I don't know. So, I mean, as I said, the upside, and there's quite some upsides, is that LibreOffice could relicense, and so we are now under MPL, which is slightly better, we think, from a like how LibreOffice, like with extensions and everything, is built. So it's slightly more business friendly. So LGPL means you have to. So if you add a file, you have to open source that file. And MPL, it's like you change the file, you have to publish. And if you add something like new files, new functionality, then in theory you can keep that proprietary. So there are upsides, and of course the OpenOffice project, there's lots of friendly people there that we meet frequently at conferences. But of course at the time it was quite a problem because then of course there's now 2 projects. So who's the trade press is going to celebrate, and who are the, like, if you want to hack an open source Office suite, like, where are you going to go? I think in the end that turned out quite all right. So if you look at the contributors, this is a scientific paper that had a bit of a look there. You see quite some overlap. So you actually see people committing on both ends. But you also see like how relatively small that is. And for something as 10 million lines of code or 8 million lines, depending on how you count, of course, number of committers actually matters to make a difference. So in the end, it was mostly this where we ended up. I think both places have a point. Of course, having some nice solar roof is nice. I like to be living on that side. And finally, then I will hand over to Björn with a bit of like take-home messages and actually like actionable content, like what to take for your own projects if you want to fork. So we had this little foundation thing there. So we actually promised to have a foundation, and then someone said foundation in German, that means Stiftung. So let's have Stiftung. And actually nobody ever did that. So we had to figure out how to do that. And we did it in Berlin. It was cool. Berlin, I love them. It just took a while.
Also, the lawyer you see there we can make him an honorary hacker, because he made a Stiftung to be something that was never done before, namely that its leadership is democratically elected by the contributors. No one ever did that, and Berlin was very, what's that? When that came up, so it was.
Berlin was like, what's that? Well, actually, why not?
Yeah, but it was something something very new and like done the first time there.
Right. So so there's lots and lots of things to say about that foundation thing, but I'm not. If you are curious, hit me up after the talk. So let's hand over. So there's lots of numbers and lots of conferences, and actually the project is actually going strong and growing, which is just awesome to be a part of. It's now actually able to attract about €1.5 million of donations a year, and with that able to sustain a substantial number of people, both like hired staff that run the foundation and that run the infrastructure and that do the builds and releases and do mentoring and all of that, and also like to fund development, both with internal developers and with tenders, like tendering that to the ecosystem. Right, and that's that bit. Any questions so far?
Just out of interest, did any of you work on StarOffice? Maybe on 4.0 or something?
Really? Because StarOffice was always a product, like there was always this, there was single vendor open source. You had OpenOffice, and then you had the proprietary version of that, dual license, if you will. So Sun had a contributor license or a copyright assignment, so they were able to sell StarOffice under proprietary terms, and did that till the last day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did so too, and it was wonderfully harder to build because it didn't have open source contributors making the build even easier back then. So, and LibreOffice made it a lot more easy for people to actually contribute. So OpenOffice was already hard, but StarOffice was way harder to use because it was internal and we can't treat our developers like that.
Yeah, I don't know if you. I mean, I think many of you are working on software. So do you agree with that difference between if it's open source and you get contributors actually making things easy and nice and fun matters, but internal projects somehow not? Is that generally the case?
Yeah.
Yeah. I kind of. It's interesting. So it's great. I mean, that's one of those great things with open source. So go contribute to open source. The fun is there.
All right. So let's go to the boilerplate and some stuff you might find interesting, horrifying, and whatever when you start a fork, like licenses, ownership and CLAs, contributor license agreements, codes of conduct, brands, statutes, and donations. So what of these things are important? Is it important to have a license? General agreement in the audience? Is it important which OSI-approved license you choose? I would say not so much, actually, as who owns the code. For example, if you have to contribute all your code to one company or one entity, they can change the license. And, well, HashiCorp did that recently, like last week with Terraform. In that case, the license isn't that important because if you're not owning it anyway, they can change it at any time. So yes, it's important to have an OSI-approved license. Which one is not that important? So just choose one of the OSI-approved ones.
Yeah, I think that's really one of the many take-home messages. Go with Borg standard stuff. Don't reinvent anything that does not matter for what you really can do, which is hacking on code. So run with one of the three most prominent OSI-approved licenses. Which one actually does not matter that much if you want to fork? Probably you can't change the license anyway, so just run with the license you got. So in hindsight, we had this discussion in 2010. In hindsight, I don't think the license fundamentally matters, except for the case that, of course, your project needs to agree. So it's more like the underlying basement, like the how your community interacts. Like if I contribute code, what am I getting back? What are others getting out of it? So in a sense, it matters, but not greatly. Yeah. What matters is not alienating your contributors. In that way, it does matter.
And going beyond that, for what is true for the license is even more true for the code of conduct. If you want to write your own, your contributors will spend 2 years fighting each other, hating each other in the end, and not talking to each other and not coding. So just take one of the existing code of conducts and use that. The importance is really to execute on what is in the code of conduct and not each single word in the code of conduct. Brands and donations, that's also quite important. If you want to have donations or if you want to have money and something or users, then the brands are important. Because when LibreOffice started, you had the contributors from the first day. I was joining half a year later. But the users, there are still lots of people using OpenOffice, even though it's not even like there's not even a cow to ride on anymore. It's so dead, or horse to ride on. So brands are really important if you depend on the users in some form or way.
And that's surprising. I don't know. So as a geeky person, I would always why does it matter? I mean, why do I care how the thing is called? Is it bleedingly obvious that this gets more contribution than that? So I'm going for that. But of course, if you're end user focused, that doesn't work. So I mean, I don't know if you made the experience as well, how strong brands are and how much that matters once you have an established brand you're up against. But don't underestimate that. Also, the longevity. So the OpenOffice is still getting, I don't know, 100 million, a million downloads or something a month.
Okay, let's go on. Next slide. So we have this wonderful title, An Aging Organization. We forked 10 years ago. So what did we learn? So let's quickly go to the next slide. 10 years ago, roughly, we set sail and everyone was agreeing on which direction to go. And it was roughly something like this. Yeah, we want to promote open source and it should be free. This is actually the English translation. It says free of charge. The German one says freie Nutzung, which is not explicitly free of charge. So there's already some things in there that might be misunderstood or understood differently for different people. And how many of these are the words that you can have epic discussions 10 years after about. And the interpretation of these words are everyone agrees on the sentence that was there in the beginning, but not everyone agrees on what they mean. And that might actually, that means that it's really important to get a shared understanding what you're aiming for and still have that renegotiated if the environment changes, if something like cloud productivity becomes a thing and so on. All right. So what should you take care of when you do something like that? You build the ship of Theseus and you exchange things on the deck. Well, the things you should quickly exchange is, I don't know if you can see that, but it's technology and being able to work in different environments. You should also not always, like directors like me should not stay on the board for 8 years and like you not for longer. But but that's we kind of had the problem that we don't have enough candidates, but still you should exchange people and there should not be single points of failure and people being like having power just for their role. But the things that should be eternal should be principles like doers decide. Freedom is important, like freedom in freedom as in beer or freedom as in freedom. That you fight lock-in and monopolies, and that you want to have your project sustainable and open and diverse and things like that. And we did not succeed in everything we say there. I mean, there are two white guys standing on the stage here, but still, it's important to have the principles to be there and everyone having a shared understanding about them and being flexible about the rest, the stuff that is more to the right.
Yeah, and quite indeed. And that's like for longer term projects, the only constant is change. So make sure you can change. There is a bit of a problem because some things can't easily be changed for a number of reasons once you've set sail and went on. So the ship of Theseus is a great metaphor, just that you can't change anything that is below the waterline, and that's quite a lot for LibreOffice.
Yeah. So what you get is you have a vision, a mission, something where you want to get to, and then you have holographic superpositions, which is what everyone thinks everyone else agrees upon, but maybe not everyone is agreeing on. So how can that look like? And I have one example. The next slide is not by me. It's by Italo, who does LibreOffice marketing. He's an awesome guy. And it shows you like how the LibreOffice project has different stratas of people. Like the core people are people who are being paid to work on that or are working on it as if they were being paid. That's a core of maybe 40 people. And then there are regular volunteers and occasional volunteers and a whole lot of people who are not in here. People doing user experience, QA, translations and stuff like that. So there's different things, and everyone has different perspectives on this. And I want to give you like the comic version of. Can you give me the next? Yeah, the comic version of a developer point of view, which incidentally might coincide with my view when I'm unconstrained by being on the board and just talking for myself. And that might be the most important part is the project. I want to win new contributors, more people who do develop on the code. I want to have innovation. I want to build new things. I want to have LibreOffice like Google Office in the cloud and stuff like that. I want it to be free as in freedom. That is, everyone should be able to innovate on top of it. And I want to have the business stuff that works on it to be actually in the product, like someone building new things on LibreOffice itself, like below the line that is actually part of LibreOffice. And then you have, again, a comic version of someone who might be further apart from the developer perspective. And that is something like, yeah, I want to have more users. For example, this is a perspective of someone who's doing trainings for LibreOffice. Then obviously that is very important. And the core product actually doesn't need to change that much. It might just be well enough to just be well maintained and get security fixes and stuff like that. It needs to be free as in beer. That is, it should not be like cost money. And the business cases are built on top of that. So I take LibreOffice as an existing product and I sell stuff on top of that. And in the end, next slide, you want to have something like this. You want to have the community create more users from which you can recruit new contributors, which again makes the product better, and maybe even create new use cases for the product, which creates more users and so on. So you should balance both of these perspectives. And we, in the Document Foundation, we have a democratic process where everyone votes and everyone has the same vote. But the thing is, you have to balance these points of view, and if you leave 10 core developers in a room, they will come up with one perspective. And you always have to bring these perspectives together so that you are not having only one side of one view on the project and the product. So that's really a challenge that grows over the years with your community getting older and seeing more of these challenges. Next slide. Yeah, so this is the summary within one in the title. There are two things here. Like if you want to have users, actually the brand is really important. For LibreOffice, the brand for getting users, LibreOffice as a brand is hugely important. It's not like for the contributors, the brand you could fork tomorrow into something called something else, maybe Go.oo or something, and no one would care. But if you have a good brand name, that actually gets you the users, and if you care for the users, that's important. And the same for the contributors, in a different way, because for the contributors, the project is really important. Like, what can I do? What are my options to grow in this thing?
Right. So this is essentially the. We have one last sentence. This is the essence of it. So I was listing five important things earlier in this talk, but many of them flow out of those two. You need a name. If you don't have a name, have the means to make a name. Like, make a big splash, make sure you get lots of attention. You need contributors, of course. So take your contributors with you. If you can't, be prepared for a rough ride or have some means to create a new community. Those two are the most important things to have. If you don't have an answer to those two questions, don't fork. Yes, let me read that because it's, I think, not visible with the sun. Forking, we can help. Come and ask us. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Thorsten and Björn, for a great, trip down memory lane, but also very practical information about open source projects and how to, survive being borged. Any questions?
Thank you. Have you already thought, I mean, before you have thought that maybe OpenOffice would be the winner in the game?
So I was at OpenOffice at the time, so I had no thoughts in that regard. So you got to answer that one.
Yeah, as I said earlier, so this is hindsight is 22. That's hypothetically maybe it could have changed something. At the time, we were absolutely convinced that if this becomes known, that Oracle would play this divide and conquer game and go to many corporate friends and say, well, your database licenses are priced like that, and maybe you want to change your mind so that they price the same tomorrow. So we're really, really afraid that they would pick out those, like in particular, corporate sponsors of the LibreOffice project from the early days that actually contributed a lot of development resources that they would be not available or gone or sitting on the fence. But yeah, as I said, hard to say what would have happened.
Hello. Yeah. Did anyone stay in Oracle for long enough to actually make any friends there? Out of all the developers, obviously been there for decades, and maybe tempt some of them over to the bright side.
So, so I left on 1st of February. I was at Canonical. 6 weeks later, everyone at Canonical was at Oracle was fired. So a lot of those who were still with the company at the point that I left were there just for 6 more weeks. Were not allowed to move over, and then Red Hat hired quite a few of them, and they became quite valuable core developers in LibreOffice. But obviously, we could not, in the LibreOffice ecosystem, like hire everyone who was just fired. We would have loved to, mostly, but yeah.
But actually, we managed over the course of the years following. So well, we had to start from somewhere, and that was quite constrained. But actually, we managed over the course of the years to pick a few more from those former core developers down. And so, I mean, there is with Oracle. I mean, so there are great people at Oracle to this very day, and like very, very good open source people to this very day. So of course it's a bit of a black and white comic strip villain thing that we painted here, and apologize for that, but it makes for great talk.
Yeah. Also, it's a good idea to talk to Oracle people if they're at FOSDEM or something like that, where you can talk about the projects and not about the company, and they might be more interested in like the things you share and not the things that, like, I mean, don't make them defend their company. That doesn't help anyone.
I mean, is there anyone working for Oracle here?
Good. One last question.
So my question is, in recent days there have been a lot of moves from companies against open source projects. What is your take? How could these projects, like how could open source be more could be better for the companies so that they share this common vision in the future? Like how could this so what incentives would you have to set? That's basically my question.
Well, it's a bit tricky to see all of open source projects, but I think you see quite a few of those projects that were open sourced and were closed sourced now, or in some way move towards that. It might have been always the plan of that company. If that's a venture capital company that wants to grow big, that might always be the plan. And
because open source is not a business model.
Yeah. So the thing you need to do, and this is what we were talking about here too, and we had in the foundation statutes, is to make the project sustainable, and that means it needs to for also for the commercial entities, it needs to be relevant to be part of that, and there are actually very few projects who did that. Apart from LibreOffice, I think Linux is one of the projects where it's really multiple contributors from all over the place. They all have very different use cases, and that's why it works. So many people have so many use cases that their shared work is more valuable than if they would do their own thing. And you need to find that thing to make everyone have a shared interest in the thing.
Right, so open source helps tremendously for getting very, very widely distributed, like ubiquitously distributed everywhere. It also helps attracting contributions if it's accessible, if it's well done, but it's not a business model. So you need to, as Björn said, some might think that for venture capital, the idea was to get onto everybody's machine and then cash out. For LibreOffice, we already had all of that there, so we had existing business models that could continue. We could fine-tune that. We could find spots there. And of course, we didn't need to feed 120 people, which was sad at the time, but it also made it slightly easier to keep things going and growing over the time.
Thanks a lot, Thorsten and Björn. Thanks for your insights. Let's give another round of applause for Thorsten and Björn.